let's learn. So I want to start with a story. Part of what I teach is about women in Tanakh, so I'm very excited about this series, to be able to speak about women who don't speak directly in the Psukim. So we're going to have to pull from Medrash, from the Gemara, to try to understand what it is that they're not saying within the text. But I want to start with the story. So the Rebbe Rashab was he was in like a different plane. You know that there's some of these Rebbeim who don't live in the actual physical realm, so he was one of those. And he had a shamish, he had someone who worked alongside him, who would provide everything that he needed. And one day, they brought him a bowl of soup. And the Rebbe Rashab sat with the soup in front of him. He kept stirring the bowl. And he didn't take a slurp. He didn't do anything. And the shamish, after a while, was wondering what was going on. Why wasn't he drinking the soup? So he waited. The Rebbe just kept stirring the soup. Didn't do a thing. And after a while, the shamish couldn't hold himself back. He said, Rebbe, if you dig a little deeper, you'll find the lakshan. Just dig a little deeper, you'll find the lakshan. And the Rebbe Rashab jumped up and he said, that's what I needed to hear. If I dig a little deeper, I'll find the lakshan. And he went into an ecstatic state. So sometimes, when it comes to women in the Parsha, you gotta dig a little deeper to find the lakshan. Because if you're just looking at the surface, you're not going to be able to see all the depth. And the depth is there. You're going to see the sources that I'm bringing are not some random, far-off sources that are completely radical. I'm bringing you straight Gemara, straight Medrash. And I promise you, or I hope, that we'll walk out of here thinking something about Bilah and Zilpah that we didn't before we walked in. So let me throw it out there right away. Why are Bilah and Zilpah not included as matriarchs? What is your answer? We hear their names all the time. We know that tribes came from them. But they're like, they talk about them for a few psukim and then they're gone. Why are they not included?
Maybe their lineage didn't warrant them to be, because Eliezer was looking for somebody from a certain household, didn't want a Knani. Maybe they were not so miyuchasot.
Even though 4 tribes come from them.
Even though.
So those tribes are like lesser, those are the ones that got lost? I don't know.
No, but the ones, the imahot, are the linchpin of who we are.
So there's something about them that's different. There's something about them that provides something for our legacy that's in a different level.
Could it have been their lower social status, after all they were gifts from Lavan to his daughters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
So maybe just the fact that they were made servants right away discredits them.
Sometimes they're called servants, sometimes they're called wives of Jacob. They're not very
So maybe
clear.
it's their status. It's because of who they were and the role that they played that they're not included on a certain madrega. Your hand was up also.
Yeah, they weren't like main wives. They were like sort of given, like it's different status.
Yeah, this is a polygamous society, which we sometimes forget, but you really have to keep that in mind.
Right, that we're looking at it with different, we can't look at it with our eyes, that everyone was equal level wives. There's something about
like
them.
Rachel gave Yaakov, them, because she couldn't have children.
Right, they were just surrogates. We're really just using them as like makeshift wombs. It sounds really...
Sort of surrogate.
Yeah, they really are just being part of the story because of their ability to conceive when Rachel couldn't. With Leah, it's harder, but with Rachel, she couldn't do this, so she needed to bring these women in. Mm-hmm.
Within Imahot, each one has a story of a challenge or
Beautiful.
for want of another word, a drama or an isayon. We don't know of anything that happened to them because perhaps it didn't, so...
Or it didn't, we just don't get in on the goods.
But they're an example for us on how we should live our lives when we are faced with challenges. And here we don't know.
We don't know enough about them to have them be enough of the narrative, so they're just the second tier of these women. So I'll tell you when this came, when my first interest in them started was I went with my husband to Italy. And we saw Michelangelo's Moses, with the horns. And on either side of Moses are these less known statues, also by Michelangelo, of Rachel and Leah. And Rachel, in I guess Michelangelo's depiction, she looks like a nun. It's very interesting to see how Michelangelo with Moshe and with David also how he envisioned them. So Rachel looks like a nun, and Leah looks more like a seductress. And he's obviously imposing his interpretation on them. But in some ways, I want us to keep that of like, what's the difference, not just between Bilhah and Zilpah and the Rachel and Leah, but what's the difference between Rachel and Leah? So when I saw these statues, I thought, why didn't he include these other two women? It was a decision, obviously, because to him, Rachel and Leah were the only ones, and Rachel's the good guy, and Leah's a little schwach. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start an inquiry. I'm going to start learning about these women and see maybe there's something that I don't know. So your first source, I just brought in English because I have a lot to go through, so I think it's better to just read them. And I want you to put on your Torah scholar hat and to look at, I know you all know these psukim. We've all read them. We know the story. But I want you to start asking questions based off of what we're going to read right now. Something should strike you about it. So I'll read to you. And Rachel saw that she had not borne any children to Yaakov. And Rachel envied her sister, and she said to Yaakov, give me children, and if not, I am dead. And Yaakov became angry with Rachel, and he said, am I instead of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? So she said, here is my maidservant Bilhah. Come to her, and she will bear children on my knees, so that I too will be built up from her. So she gave him her maidservant Bilhah for a wife, and Yaakov came to her. And Bilhah conceived, and she bore Yaakov a son. And Rachel said, God has judged me, and he has also hearkened to my voice, and has given me a son. So she named him Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, conceived again, and bore Yaakov a second son. And Rachel said, with divine bonds I have been joined to my sister. I have also prevailed. So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing children, she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Yaakov for a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, bore Yaakov a son. And Leah said, luck has come, so she named him Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, bore Yaakov a son. And Leah said, because of my good fortune, for women have declared me fortunate, so she named him Asher. What strikes you?
Well, first of all, Rachel and Leah named the babies. Why didn't Bilhah and Zilpah?
Beautiful. So they're really Rachel and Leah's kids.
Right. But
So it goes back to what we
again,
said
like
about
a surrogate.
surrogates. Right.
It's more like a surrogate, like, I don't know. They were way before the time today where you have a surrogate mother.
Right.
It's, I don't know, that strikes me. Why did Rachel and Leah name the babies if they weren't, they didn't carry them?
Beautiful. What else?
The similarity to the story of Sarah and Hagar.
Beautiful. Can you explain a little bit more?
Well, when Sarah couldn't conceive, she requested that Avram use Hagar as her surrogate, but the child, I think she used the phrase being born on my knees, and she would be I guess you could say the official mother.
Right.
Though things worked out differently, but anyway.
Well, and that's right. If we're saying that they don't get enough narrative, Hagar gets narrative.
She does,
We've
yes.
learned about her. So in some ways, this is a replica of that, but in some ways, it's different
yes.
because Hagar has a moment of prophecy. Hagar, despite all the confusion with the story, Amalek speaks to her as she runs away. So there's something about Hagar that achieves a level that it seems like, even if the end of the story, it complicates it, we villainize her. Here, they're not, you don't necessarily see any merit of their own, other than the fact that they happen to be maidservants of Rachel and Leah. But from this, we don't really see any schus that they have to be able to have 4 tribes come from them, even if just physically. Did anything else strike anyone?
Leah already had.
Right, but why does Leah need this? She needs more. So there's a competition. You just yes. There's a rivalry. There's an underlying rivalry between Rachel and Leah. They both want a certain status level, and she says this isn't enough. If Rachel's going to do this, then I want to be able to do this too. I'll say what struck me. It's as if the psukim never give us information that's unnecessary. The Torah, for all it tells us, is very short on words. How many times does it have to explain to us that they're maidservants? Look how many times it says it. Every time they're described. Bilhah, the maidservant. Zilpah, the maidservant. But we didn't forget. It's clear that there's something about their identity that is attached to this role. And obviously in the English you don't see, but in the Hebrew it shifts. Sometimes it's a shifcha, and sometimes it's an amma, and when it calls them a wife, the word is isha. They are full wives. It's not a pilegesh. They're full wives. So that's also complicated. Are they maidservants or are they full wives? What's happening here? Just parenthetically, I was trying to find where the names Bilhah, because we know that Leah is named because of her eyes. So I was trying to find the roots of Bilhah and Zilpah. So for Bilhah, the root is Beit Lamed Hey, and it occurs 16 times in all of Tanakh. And the idea is that something is worn out. That's what her name means. It's worn out. The adjective balem means worn out. The masculine noun below means worn out things like a rag. The feminine noun tavlit means destruction. So there's something about her that's like physically damaged, like the lowest level of physicality. And Zilpah is from the word zalaf, which means a drop. Like nothingness. Both of them. That's something inherent in who they are. Nothingness. Physicality. A rag. Doesn't make you think about, I don't know, Sarah, Rachel, Rivka. There's something about this. It's coarse physicality. As low as you can go. So now, hold on. So we're saying, we for sure think, I just want to say this before we get to crux where we're going to see a machlokas, for sure they're not included as matriarchs, right? So let's read the Gemara, and the Gemara is going to agree with what we just said. Ein koran avos el l'shlosha ve'ein koran imahos el la'arba. Like 4 is mothers. So the Gemara says 4 are the mothers. Don't get it twisted. There's 4 mothers, and there's 3 fathers. And the Gemara goes on to say that, like, maybe we're going to say, read it in English. What's the reason for this exclusivity with regard to the patriarchs? If you say that it's because we don't know whether we descend from Reuben or for Shimon, so we can't accurately say our father Reuben, for example. So we don't know which tribes anybody's coming from, but we know that we come from these 3. That's why they are our patriarchs. We don't have a question of legacy. We know that we're all coming from these 3 sources, and we know that we're coming from our matriarchs. And now we're going to see a machlokas between the Gemara and the Medrash. In Bamidbar Rabbah, Vayaviu et korbanam lifnei Hashem 6 agalot. 6 keneged sheshet yemei bereishis. 6 keneged shisha sedrei mishnah. 6 keneged imahos. Elu hen, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Vizilpah. Uh-oh. We got a machlokas. What's happening here? And I wanted to bring you another one, so it's not like one random source. Esther Rabbah says the same thing. Rabbi Hoshaya Rabbah said Solomon's throne was special in that it was made in the form of the chariot of the one who spoke the world was created, the Holy One, Blessed One, the Holy Blessed One. And so it states Solomon's throne had 6 steps corresponding to the 6 heavens, 6 corresponding to the 6 earths, 6 corresponding to the 6 orders of the Mishnah, 6 corresponding to the 6 days of creation, 6 corresponding to the 6 matriarchs. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. What's going on? Obviously, this is a big disagreement. Gemara is telling us one thing, Medrash is telling us another. How can we hold both those things to be true at the same time?
Well,
Anyone?
They'd always have to agree.
Beautiful. So they're not going to agree. There's not. That would be way too easy if I could just like sum this up with a bow.
Okay.
But there's something about them
Yeah.
inherently in who they are, not just the role that they played. There's something about them that makes them matriarch level, and there's something about them that says, can't be. Doesn't it bother anyone else that they never saw this Medrash? I saw this and I was like, I wish I would have seen this. No? Shake your head, why no?
I don't know. Only because this is how we've been educated.
Yeah, but forget your education for a second. Come back here. This is what it says. It's not a random source. Medrash is saying that for some reason they should be included. Let it blow your mind a little. Let it bother you. Why have I never heard about this? Let's go a little bit deeper. Read the Zohar. Oh, wait, so hold on. But then, so let's say it's written by men, whatever that means. Shouldn't that bother you more that they would be included? When you read most feminist literature now, where they're trying to like revamp our understanding of the matriarchs, they're the ones who are saying include Bilhah and Zilpah.
Right.
Why are you saying that these women who were of a lesser status don't count?
Right.
They're the ones who are trying to bring it in. So here the Medrash is saying, no, don't forget about
They
them.
do count. Okay.
So let's read the Zohar, because this also I read and was like, why didn't I ever learn this? Now the Shlina never departed from the tent of Leah or the tent of Rachel. We know about this with the Shlina being over the tent of Sarah, and then it was there also with Rivka. So the same thing happened when it was with Rachel and Leah. The Shlina was there. There was a cloud above the tent. The truth is that during the lives of Leah and Rachel, the Shlina hovered over them, and now that they had died, the Shlina never departed from the house, but took up her abode, namely in the tent of Bilhah. So something about her gets now there to be the Shlina there. Nobody else is shaking their head like I was shaking my head. I was shocked. Because I really thought of her as some second-class, really meaningless figure who, for lack of a better term, was a baby maker. Really, that's how I saw her. But this suggests that if the Shekhinah dwelled above her tent, that there was something inherent about who she was that allowed the divine presence to rest upon her. And we learn also from the Zohar that the Shekhinah only rests upon a tent when the marriage is a true marriage. Meaning that Bilhah and Yaakov, for whatever that means Kabbalistically, their marriage was legitimate. Their marriage was something in the eyes of God, enough that his presence could dwell with them. So now we need to backtrack a little, because I don't think that we can understand Bilhah and Zilpah. I don't think we can understand them effectively unless we understand the difference between Rachel and Leah. So first we're going to have to kind of get a Kabbalistic, metaphysical understanding of what these two women represent, and then we're going to be able to understand Bilhah and Zilpah. So what we said before, this rivalry that existed between Rachel and Leah, where do we see that? Where does that show up in their story? Just give me straight shot.
That she says, I also want a child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think it shows up at the very beginning, really, when Yaakov is deceived about who his wife is. It comes out very early that seems to be that Rachel is the beloved wife and Leah is
the hated wife. Hated.
Yeah, she's described as Nuah.
Hated.
Yes.
So Rachel, for whatever reason, is beautiful. That's what it tells us. She's beautiful and beloved. And Leah is hated. So that becomes part of their marriages.
Yeah.
That Leah is the lesser one. And Rachel is the one that achieves status. She's the one that everybody, even Michelangelo, she's the one that everybody reveres. She's the good one. So if we're getting into real dichotomy, a real simple understanding, Rachel good, Leah bad. So I don't know if that bothers anyone. It bothers me a little, but that's the way that it seems to be presented. That Rachel is the one that's loved, and Leah is the one that is hated. Hated is pretty strong Lashon. So I want to explain to you. I'm taking now from the Ishbitz. Read the next source. Rachel represents the revealed world, Alma Ditgalia, those things one grasps consciously and does in full awareness of what one is doing. That is why her sons Yosef and Binyamin found favor in the eyes of Yaakov. Their actions seem to be the height of clarity, composedness, reason, and control. But Yaakov was first given a different wife. Leah became his in the night, without his knowledge or control, without wanting her. Leah represents the concealed world, Alma Ditkasia, beyond what the mind can grasp and recognize as good, and thus her sons did not favor in their father's eyes like Rachel's sons did. There's something about Leah that represents the hidden world, and there's something about Rachel that represents revealed good, where you see God's light made manifest in the world. That's Rachel. Goodness that you see and you recognize it. Leah is more complicated. Leah, you have to see how the story progresses to understand her goodness. It ends pretty challengingly because who ends up with Yaakov? Who's buried with Yaakov? Leah. Leah's the real wife. Who's with Yaakov in the Olam Haba? Leah. So even though Leah has this part of her that's messy, ugly, not as easily loved, she's the real wife in the end. And Rachel, who had all of this trouble conceiving, becomes the mother who's crying for all of us. So in this world, it seems like she was the wife, but in the end, she's really the mother. Do we see that? So now I'm going to have to try to explain something to you. We're going to have to try to think of Mashalim, because it's not going to be so easy. So according to Hasidus Kabbalah, Leah represents the higher hay in Hashem's name, and Rachel represents the lower hay. So I'm going to explain to you what I mean, and I'll tell it with a story. So it's amazing when you're looking for a story for a class, and then something happens the night before, which is what happened. My husband was giving a shiur, and someone at the table told the story, and I was like, that's perfect for tomorrow. So this girl was describing how she was newly from, and she was living in Israel, and she was going to a seminary, and she got invited to one of these Shabbos tables that are like a big mix, where there's Beis Yaakov girls, and there's girls who are at Hebrew U, and there's girls who are newly in Sem. And the couple whose house it was, they were used to hosting people who were from all different walks of life. So the question they asked at their table was, where do you see God in your life? And they like threw it at all of these girls who were their guests. And the girls from Hebrew U answered first. And the way that the student of my husband described it was, she said, like, if you looked around the table, like, it was a very stark contrast, that there were these Beis Yaakov girls who had like butt-inch collars up to here, then there were these girls in tank tops and shorts, and nobody had told them anything. So the girls in tank tops and shorts started telling her story of where she saw God, and she started talking, and she's like inserting all these expletives, like she's cussing at the table, like has no idea what's happening. And she said, you know, I was out, beep, 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 and I needed to go buy a bottle of wine, and I couldn't find the one that I wanted. But then I went to the store and I saw this bottle of wine. It wasn't the one that I wanted, but it had my grandmother's name on it. And I just thought that that was so beep, beep, awesome. And I knew that God must be in the world. So you saw the host be like, oh, okay. But like, it's a nice way of finding God in the universe. And then the next girl, also from Hebrew U, starts telling the story about how she worked in a farm, and when she was milking the cows, she saw the divine, and that's how God's presence is, because she felt like she could take care of these animals. Fine. And then it like moves to these girls from Beis Yaakov, and you saw them like fidgeting at the table. And they like look at each other, like, I don't know where I see God. And they're like wearing the uniform, but like, they don't know where I see God. And they start talking to one another, and they say, well, like Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is how I know that God's in the world. It's like pretty disappointing. So after the class, I was speaking to my husband, and I said, you know, in some ways, the girls who walk in, who like look the part, who like look so beautiful, it's a Rachel expression. It like looks good, and you see how they connect to God in certain ways. It's like right out there in your face. Those are girls who are going to be davening at the kotel, and it'll be real. You'll see it expressed. But there's something about those girls who are crass at the table, where on the surface it's not so beautiful, but there's a depth there. There's a hiddenness that's a connection to God in a deeper way. That's a Leah expression. So what we're going to see soon is the people who are not at the table, who never even get invited to a Shabbos meal, who don't know that Shabbos exists, that's Bilah and Zilpah. Who are so much in the darkness that they're so disconnected on the surface. But really they're walking around connected to God because we believe everybody's connected to God. But it's not even there. So that's our mashal. Rachel is when you see the sunset, and you see the beautiful Shabbos table, and you learn it in a Daf Gemara, and God is expressed, and it's beautiful. And Leah is when you're crying alone in your room and broken. It's the song of you that only God hears. It doesn't look as beautiful. We hear that? We can think of examples like that in our own lives, all of us who have the Rachel and the Leah. Rachel is our Instagram self. It's the part, I say it with the joke, but that's the piece that you're willing to post in social media. Especially in a high school environment, we sometimes focus on the Rachel piece more than the Leah piece, which is a shame. The Rachel piece is that going to get you? It's going to get you the applause. I can speak for myself, it's like the Rebbitzin image that I want to project out to the world. You know, where like I'm a good yid and I do what I'm supposed to do. The Leah is the part that like, if someone was to see it about me, I'd probably be mortified, right? Those things that you see when you lose it with your spouse or your kids, that piece of you that if that was publicized, you would be like, oh my goodness. But God's as much there too. Rationally, we know that God is as much there as in the beautiful parts of us, right? We hear that? Bilah and Zilpah is even, it's like the darkest of the dark. That piece of you that you can't connect it back to God. You can't connect it. The Leah is when you get it out and you realize, oh, okay, now it makes sense. I can connect the dots afterwards of why I needed to go there, why that needed to happen. Bilah and Zilpah is so removed you can't see it, and you won't see it. Do we hear that? Of what that might look like in our own lives, of having all those disparate parts of ourselves? When we talk about relating to God, the Rachel piece is so much easier. So much easier. Like we're scared to show the Leah piece to God, even though we know that that's what he wants from us actually. It's the Leah piece that ends up being with Yaakov. It's the Leah that's the real revelation. When we talk about the Mishkan with the tablets, the whole tablets and the broken tablets are in there, right? They kept the broken tablets. Why? Why don't you throw it away? Broken tablets. Moshe broke them. Just throw it away. It's embarrassing. That's us messing up. Why do we have to keep both of them?
Part of the story.
Part of the story.
It's a reminder.
And it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake. That's as much part of the story as the whole tablets. God wants that. God wants the broken and, to quote Leonard Cohen, the holy and the broken hallelujah. He wants both. It's not a mistake. And I think it's a danger that we put out there that God only likes the holy. It makes us feel real low about ourselves. And we live in a world that really, it's like an image of what holiness looks like. This is the good student. This is the good mother. And then we have all this shame that we walk around with about our brokenness. But from what we're learning today, Leah is the higher hay. The goodness, the holiness that you can't see, that's when God's light isn't manifest, whatever that means. That's closer to the divine realm. This split between Rachel and Leah, it's throughout all of Yiddishkeit. So Reb Tzadok, he talks about this all the time, and he uses the mashal for everything. So Rachel is Torah study. Tefillah is Leah. Tefillah is that hidden peace. It's not as in your face. Yehuda and Yosef. Yosef is Rachel. Beautiful. Tzaddik. He doesn't do anything wrong. Yehuda is the one who's arguing against. Yehuda is the ultimate Baal Tshuva, the brokenness. When we talk about Yehuda going down with Tamar, that's included in his Kedusha when we think of anything about David HaMelech. I'm saying this as a joke, but Mashiach comes from that line, from the line of the brokenness. Mashiach could not get a shidduch today. Look at Mashiach's yichus. I'm serious. I'm saying it as a joke, but it's real. Mashiach comes from all this line of these really complicated, especially sexual relationships. It's the brokenness. I think my background is social work. And when we talk about trauma, anybody who really looks at trauma, even though it's so muddy and we want to look at our goodness, not the things that we've been through, it's the healing of trauma that actually is more important than our strengths, than our Rachelness. The Leah parts of ourselves, in some ways, is who we truly are when our subconscious is at work, all the stuff that we've been through. Someone else has to speak because I'm speaking a lot right now. Does this resonate? Or we're like, oh, I don't want to look at the Leah. It's just so, I'm scared of it. Someone else has to talk. Give it to me. What do we think? Be brave.
So does it make them better than us, the Zilpas and the Bilhas? Because they're coming from someplace so much
Even
lower.
darker than that. So I don't know about better, but what do we think?
And they really could be on the Madrega, the Imahot.
Because there's something even lower than that. It's like darkness that we don't even...
But then on the other part of it, in the back of my mind, I'm saying, then this asks me, so what was Hashem's, why did he take them to be
Dahlia Adams and Amira Wittenberg,
He could
please
have
come
found
to
somebody
Mrs. Appel's
from
office.
higher
Dahlia
birth,
Adams
better,
and
just made
Amira
it one
Wittenberg, please
big
come to Mrs. Appel's
good
office.
bowl of cherries.
Right, so he didn't.
So he didn't.
He
So
didn't. So there's something about the
he
good
had
bowl
a
of cherries
reason
that...
for
Exactly.
not-
Beautiful. There's a reason why that God said, we need a little bit of column A of this Rachel, we need a little bit of Leah, and we need a little bit of this Bilhah and Zilpah. And it's going to be messy. Forget the bowl of cherries. Forget this image of we have to forget that God wants it with a bow. If God wanted the reality with a bow, he wouldn't have created humans. We're the ones that are rocking the boat. He wants a rocking boat. There's something about God where he wants us to take physicality and elevate it towards him, yeah.
But
I mean, is there anything, we're attributing this secondariness, weakness, whatever, nothing to do with the way they behave, just from where they came from. I feel like that's so appalling. I can't accept that God would say we're not all the same, and it's really how we behave and how we deal with the challenges that we have, and that's how we should be judged, not, well, you come from a bad family or
Right.
a bad background.
That bothers
I always
us.
feel like it's like an accident of birth,
Right.
so I don't know, it's hard for me to imagine that
So from
that's
that,
how God would judge somebody.
that where you come from.
Yeah.
Or it's the opposite, right? Like if God, or it's the opposite, which should empower us. If God wanted everyone to be from B'nai Brak, like if that's the only kind of Yidden that God wanted, he could have done that. So I can speak for myself as a Baal Tshuva. There's a reason why I was born into the family that I was in. Not to get rid of that, not to forget about that, to use that, to bring that into this world.
Because there's value in that too.
Well, and if we're really, when we say Einod Milvado, are we serious or not? Like, is there as much God in the drama dance classes that I took when I was 6? Is God as much there as he is in Cheder? Well, we have to be serious about it. Which one's more? God's presence light is equal.
He's there.
Yeah, he's
But
there.
We have to find him there.
And how much more? If we really believe that that our sins can be turned into merits if we do real tshuva, then we need to be able to be in those places, because how else is the light going to get there? Unless I, today, can now look back and say how much the drama classes that my mom made me take helps me as a Rebbitzin today.
Oh,
But that's Leah. That's an easy example where I can look and say that darkness became light. Bill and Zilpah, I'm never going to do it till 120.
But yet they were Shvatim.
Yeah. So
So
something
they
about
did
their
do-
darkness.
So they did.
Well, and if I don't know enough about the 10 lost tribes. I don't know enough about them, to be honest. But they come from these women. And if that means that there are Yidden out there who don't even know that they're Jewish, these people out there who are so disconnected, in some ways that makes sense why they would come from Bila and Zilpah, because they're raising sparks or they're doing goodness in this world that we can't connect back to us. It's just goodness that's out there that come from these two women. In some ways, that's such a beautiful message that it's not always about getting so much about what I speak to my students about is getting the likes on Facebook and people seeing your they got no likes. Nobody was giving them rounds of applause. And the tragedy is many of us aren't giving them rounds of applause when we have in our tradition that perhaps we should be. Perhaps we should be speaking about them a little bit more. Those people that are never going to be top of the class. They're never going to be that idealized version of success. But they're raising sparks there also.
Also, the Chumash is filled with even our greatest forefathers are like messed up, all of them.
All of
They
them.
all did like ridiculous things that you would think that's it. Like, we're not paying. You're no longer one of our heroes.
Right, now you're
But
out.
somehow they keep getting.
Well, like,
Sometimes I can't even believe it. It could be like a pornographic book already.
yeah, but
I mean,
yes.
it's
Yes.
How to live. That they weren't perfect
Right.
and that they weren't ideal.
So it's for everyone.
And,
It's
know,
for
anybody
everyone.
could be
I like these ladies.
that way.
These are my two new heroes.
Well, and in some ways, it's so like the way that we like water that down is even though Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel, and Leah had sins and made mistakes, they're tzaddikim, and you too can be a tzaddik. To me, that's like those kinds of lessons can like end when we finish elementary school. What it really, that lesson isn't that I'm going to be a tzaddik. It's like just like I'm human, they're human. God wants my humanity. He doesn't want me to be an angel with no mistakes. He wants me to be able to mess up and then turn back to him. Tshuva in Hasidus really means you're going back to the womb. That's what it is. You're going back to the womb-like state of being just you and God with none of this. But if we're going to be able to do that, we have to make mistakes. And then go back and reconnect with God again and again. So I want to read you the next source. In Kabbalah, the Hebrew word for iron Barzel, is seen as an acronym for the 4 wives of Yaakov. Bilhah, Rachel, Zilpah, and Leah. So Barzel is what destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, and Barzel is what's going to rebuild the 3rd Beis HaMikdash. These are not my ideas. This is not Torah Mibeli. Significantly, the names of the maidservants appear before those of their mistresses. This reflects the fact that the maidservants were, in a sense, superior to their matriarchs. The matriarchs personified Malchus of Atzilus, as it is a native environment, the world of Atzilus. The maidservants, on the other hand, personified Malchus of Atzilus, as it's descended into the lower worlds, exactly what we're saying. This is why Avram and Yaakov did not initially want to marry their maidservants. They didn't want to be brought into the lower worlds. They didn't want to be in the mud. But the matriarchs, however, recognized the need for this descent, and therefore encouraged their husbands to marry their maidservants, precisely because they descended into the lower worlds. They were able to reconstruct Malchus, meaning Hashem's presence within the world, a necessary stage in the process of redemption. For this reason, the names of the maidservants appear before those of the matriarchs. It's pretty awesome, no? That idea that Bilhah is going to be more important than Rachel in some ways, Zilpah is going to be more important than Leah in some ways. I want you to go back to the initial psukim about Bilhah and Zilpah, and see that when it says that Bilhah got pregnant, so it says, she gave her maidservant Bilhah for a wife, and Yaakov came to her, and Bilhah conceived, and she bore Yaakov a son. We see that? Now look at what it says about Zilpah. When Leah saw that she stopped bearing children, she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Yaakov for a wife, and Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, bore Yaakov a son. Why didn't she conceive? Why is that not included? So Rashi gives one answer, that she was so young that you couldn't even tell her body was different than others. But Chassidus would say, even in the world, you didn't see the conception of what was happening. It was just a surrogate, like we're all saying. It was just a woman being brought in. It had nothing to do with what it was. The hiddenness of the Kedusha was so hidden that you didn't even see that she was being able to give birth to anything. I think some of us feel like that in our lives. Certain things in our lives, we can look back and say, oh, I had to go through this because of this. It makes sense. I had to. Certain things happen in our life, and ein li musag. I have no idea why. The suffering that we go through, the pain that we go through. So we like it in our lives when we can tie the bow. Certain things with these women, they don't get. They don't get at the end of their life. The truth is, with many of the matriarchs, they don't have that moment. With Sarah, she dies right after the Akedah. So she never has the moment of a pat on the back about anything. Rivka, we don't even hear about her death. She has that final scene where her son steals the bracha and then she disappears. We don't hear about her being buried. Rachel dies in childbirth, and Leah's the one. Leah's the one who gets a happy ending. The hated wife gets the happy ending. In this world, we don't always get to see things come to fruition. It's a dangerous religious game to say, I know why everything is happening, and I can look at everybody else's life and my own and say that this is God's plan. We're supposed to not see everything come into fruition, like Zilpah. You don't get to see everything conceived. So there's not so many sources about these women. So I was talking to my husband about it, and I said, I think there's a kina. I think on Tisha B'Av we say something that mentions Bilhah and Zilpah. I think there's one thing. So I found it. So Kinos 39, and I'll read it to you. Zion's crying. Zion, lift your... And Zion is always a woman, by the way. Zion, lift your eyes heavenward and see and eulogize and wail, for your advocate has abandoned you. Zion, cry out to your forefathers and request the establishment of your house and also the authority of your rulers. Go to the cave of the patriarchs. Zion needs to go to the cave of the patriarchs and cry out. Where are you, Hashem? Go to the cave of the patriarchs and scream with bitterness and tears that have tortured your sons, your daughters, and your descendants. Sarah, when she hears your voice, will also cry for the children captured by all who surround you. Rachel and Leah, cry. And then it says, Bilhah and Zilpah, why don't you lament? Why don't you cry out loud and strike your face? They're even silent. They're that piece of the history they can't even cry. We have those parts in our life also, right? The Rachel self is our beautiful self. The Leah part is the part that's crying hysterically on our bed with the door shut, nobody should know. The parts of us that's so dark, the subconscious that we're not even aware of, that's not even crying, that doesn't even know we're in pain. It's like one of the ongoing discussions between me and my husband. When he's like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I'm feeling right now. Like, that's how disconnected we get. Anybody else have that? Somebody nods, I don't feel so much. Where I don't even know what I'm feeling. That's how much of a mystery myself is to me. I think I know everybody else in the world. But there's those parts of myself that even I don't know. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. That's Villa and Zilpa. The darkness that's so deep that you don't even cry. So now I think we can answer the machlokas of the Gemara and the Midrash. So the Gemara says, don't get it wrong, 4 mothers. There's just 4. Bilhah and Zilpah can't be counted. So that's pshat. That's what we have to tell our kids when they're learning and they're little. When we get a little bit more complicated, when we have some like higher level thinking perhaps, then we can include Bilhah and Zilpah. That's what the Midrash is saying. That's the level of drush. It can't just be out there and open. I'm going to say something that's, the Baal Shem Tov said it, so I can say it, it's fine. I have a good source. Is God in sin? Is God in sin? Does God have anything to do with sin? Yes or no? Yes. Why don't we say that to little kids? Their head would explode. It's so complicated. So in the word chet, there's an aleph. There's a hidden aleph. There's a hidden God in the sin. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. God has to be there. He has to be there. He's there as much as he is in the tshuva. He's there, hidden. That you can't tell a little kid. That would be very confusing about why you're not doing something. But on a higher level, you can think about that. That God's there too, whatever that means. He's there also, just like Bill and Zilpah are there also. They're there as matriarchs in a hidden level, like a hidden aleph. They're there and you just can't see it. Can't see it all the time. So I want to end with a story, and then we'll open it up so you can talk to me. So there's a story about a Sufi, because what share doesn't end with a Sufi? There's a story about a Sufi, and he was outside of his house, and he was looking on the ground. And one of his Talmidim, one of his students comes looking at him, and he says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he says, I lost a key. I'm sure we all know the story. This is the source. I lost a key. I can't find it. So his student says, "Don't worry, I'll help you. I'll help you find it." So the 2 of them are sitting outside, and they're looking on the floor for this key. Can't find it anywhere. And after a very long time passes, and the student says, "I don't understand. Where could this key be? Where did you lose the key?" And then the Sufi says, "I lost it inside the house. I lost the key inside the house." The guy said, "Why are we looking outside?" And he says, "That's where the light is." That's where we're looking, because that's where the light is. So all of us have keys, whatever that is, and we look for them in the light. That's where we think we're going to find it. You think we're going to find the answers where it's bright, where things make sense. But the truth is, most keys are hidden in the darkness, and we're scared to look at it. It's not as pretty. It doesn't make us feel holy. But the keys are in the darkness. So whatever that is, I think we should try to open ourselves up. That perhaps the Bilhah and the Zilpahs have more answers than we're giving them. And maybe we need to try to think more complexly about all of our foremothers, that they're not just these picture-perfect women. That does a lot of damage to us as women. It's a very dangerous road to walk down, to think that that's where all the answers are going to be. Maybe we should be looking at some of our brokenness and do it with bravery. So I give us all a bracha that we should be able to search for the keys in our life in the darkness and in the light, and that we should look for the lakshan when it comes to the women in our tradition. So
Thank you.
now, argue with me or agree with me. Tell me what you think about some of this inquiry that we've had.
I think along very different lines.
Okay, go
I
for
don't
it.
find Kabbalah helpful to explain the text.
Okay.
And
So then you can explain it to me. How, if there's this rivalry, and it really is that simple, that they're just mean to each other, how is that something that we can want to emulate. Because from the text, there's the way that Sarah
I
treats.
guess I don't make the jump from how they behave and how we should behave.
So then why are they matriarchs? What does that mean to us?
It's a good question, but.
I don't think it has to be a simple. I'm not putting you on the spot like that. I just think when you look at Sarah and how she treated Hagar, it's very hard. From like therapist me can say Sarah was having a hard time. There was this woman that was imposing upon her, but she's mean to her. She's really mean to her.
She is.
Ramban says that the reason why we go into Mitzrayim is because Sarah was mean to the Mitzri who worked for her. That's tough. So to me, it has to say that this, yes, Pshat is important, and we can stick with Pshat, but there has to be something deeper about these narratives that I can think about. So for me, Chassidus and Kabbalah help, because I like the God.
So I would look for answers elsewhere. I wouldn't look in the Hasidic world, and I wouldn't look in the world of Kabbalah.
But so maybe then, but so even with that, I think what I'm saying is still holds truth, that to look at these women and look at them more complexly, that for sure we need to be doing.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's pretty, this like, it sounds like apikoursis, but like it does seem pretty hollow. That it's hard to connect myself. Otherwise, Bill and Zilpah become like a pasuk that I read, and I just like skim through it, and they're like.
I'm not saying you shouldn't go beyond Pshat.
So we got to do it.
But you got a whole lot, in a lot of areas beyond Pshat where the way you think you might be more comfortable in some of those areas, or
So
other
Medrash
areas
and
be
Gemara.
less enlightening to you.
Medrash and Gemara. So we've got to figure out how from the Medrash they're included. That's nothing to do with Hasidus. You take off the Hasidic hat.
Okay.
But so from there we see there's something about them that we're missing from just Pshat. So I don't know, then we got to do more of an inquiry and figure out what it is.
But I think the relationship between Sarah and Hagar were very different than the relationship between Rachel and Leah
And Bilhah and Zilpah.
Like, when Hagar gave birth, she sort of decided she was better than Sarah, and that, Sarah couldn't have children,
Right.
but I could have children. So she was sort of like,
So Mepharshim
she
do
wanted
say
to
that.
take over, whereas
didn't-
Bilhah and Zilpah didn't seem to care or
Right.
mind that they were children, and they were just there for that purpose.
So I didn't mention that, but that is also, I believe it's the Sforno that says that this is like a tikkun for the scene of Sarah and Hagar, because you see rivalry between Rachel and Leah, but you don't really see it here other than Reuben, but that's not because of them. For whatever reason, they're able to take on this mantle of childbearing and not.
As a matter of fact, Leah, when she was pregnant, she knew she was having another boy, and she cared for her sister so much that she davened so she should have a girl, and let Rachel have a boy, and that's why Dinah was born, and she had Yosef.
Right.
So
You do see the
it's
dynamics.
very different dynamic.
Well, and you're seeing that all of them, like it says that Yosef was close with the children of Bilhah because he felt like outsider status. So there are all these dynamics coming to play also with the Shvatim. Like they're recognizing the different roles that these mothers played in the lives of Yaakov and the children. There's it's a whole family therapy scene that needs to happen where you see all these conflicts, especially if we're looking at them as humans. It is pretty complicated. Rachel was a young woman when she died. There's young kids that now have to be raised by the sister wives and take that role. What else? Not to put you on the spot. Okay. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thanks.
What are we doing next week?
So I did a whole series on women in Tanakh, but I really want to do the ones who don't speak. So I've got to see. I've got to see who it's going to be. We'll see. Thanks. I know. So funny that you say that.
I was going to say, but I didn't know if anyone.
No, so say it to me. Abraham, the messiness, totally.
Yeah, you're shining the light, and then dark is light.